I saw Roberto at court laughing with his lawyer about how he'd leave me with Crumbs. $3,000 for 3 years for that parasite, he said. I just smiled, clutching the purse where I had the bank statements of the $2 million I'd secretly inherited and the evidence of 20 years of humiliation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. My full and true name is Marina Silva Fernandez. I'm 48 years old of intensely lived and suffered life between the suffocating and oppressive walls of a marriage that gradually, methodically, and cruelly transformed me into a pale, unrecognizable shadow of what I could have been if I'd had the courage to choose differently on that fateful June day when I said yes before the altar decorated with white lilies that today seem like funeral flowers for the woman I was. I'm a tenured professor of contemporary Brazilian literature at a prestigious century-old federal institution, where I found intellectual and emotional refuge when my home progressively became a psychological minefield where every word was a grenade, every silence a veiled threat, every look a death sentence for my already shredded self-esteem. For interminable, excruciating, degrading, and absolutely devastating 22 years that seemed like centuries of refined psychological torture, I was married to Roberto Augusto Mendez, a pathological narcissist executive from the financial market, who climbed the corporate hierarchy, methodically stepping on anyone who crossed his ascending path to the top of the capitalist pyramid without any remorse. A calculating man devoid of basic empathy, who transformed our married life into an infinitely complex Excel spreadsheet where I was always, invariably, and predictably the blood-red number in the balance sheet, obsessively, compulsively, and pathologically, measuring my worth by how much I cost in triple-filtered drinking water, internationally certified organic food, detailed monthly household bills down to the last cent, and even the air conditioning I breathed in our 3,000-square-foot apartment strategically located in the city's most valued southern zone, with panoramic ocean view that I could rarely appreciate because he always found something to criticize if he saw me standing still contemplating the horizon for more than 30 timed seconds. The extraordinary, painful, transformative, and ultimately liberating story I'm about to tell with cinematic richness of detail began on a particularly rainy, melancholic, gray, and oppressive January afternoon, when the heavy lead sky over the city seemed to sense with ancient millennial wisdom the seismic and devastating revelations that were to come like a silent tsunami that would forever, irreversibly, and completely change the course of my existence imprisoned in a golden cage. It was at the exact, precise, and fateful moment when I discovered through a completely unexpected, surprising, and initially disturbing phone call from Dr. Mendonça, the septuagenarian respected family lawyer who had known my parents since their childhood in the countryside and had been best man at my mother's wedding, that my Aunt Clara, that eccentric, reclusive, mysterious, and enigmatic lady, whom all the arrogant, superficial, and materialistic relatives thought with barely disguised disdain lived miserably on minimal and insufficient social security in a decaying, moldy, deteriorated apartment in the abandoned historic downtown, had left me an absolutely transformative, overwhelming, monumental inheritance carefully kept secret of $2,300,000, meticulously, strategically, and intelligently divided between diversified investments in conservative fixed income and aggressive variable income, strategically valued properties in upscale neighborhoods undergoing accelerated gentrification, and a collection of Brazilian contemporary art that absolutely no one in the family remotely suspected existed, hidden in climate-controlled bank vaults. Roberto was traveling to Singapore that fateful and transformative week on yet another of his endless, pompous, pretentious, and supposedly crucial international business trips, where he closed million-dollar derivative contracts between exclusive cocktails on panoramic penthouses of five-star hotels at $1,000 a night, when I received the news through that phone call that would last only 15 timed minutes, but would completely, irrevocably, profoundly, and forever change the course of my existence imprisoned in toxic matrimony. My first visceral, automatic Pavlovian instinct conditioned by 2 decades of systematic marital subordination was to immediately grab my cell phone with trembling hands of emotion mixed with anxiety and call him through the international business roaming operator, share our unexpected and miraculous fortune that could finally realize his megalomaniac dreams of unlimited business expansion and transform our future plans into golden, gleaming reality. But then, like a ray of divine, celestial, and illuminating lucidity cutting through the thick, suffocating fog of marital submission that had enveloped me for so long like an invisible but heavy shroud, I remembered with crystalline, painful, cutting, and revealing clarity the absolutely devastating, humiliating, and degrading discussion from the night before his departure for JFK International Airport, when he had thrown in my face with surgically cruel precision practiced over years of marriage that I was an unproductive, useless, pathetic, and repugnant parasite sucking his hard-earned resources with sweat and sacrifice like a hungry, insatiable leech, that my entire family was composed of genetic failures without ambition, congenital mediocrity, or minimal capacity to generate real, tangible wealth in the modern hyper-competitive capitalist world. I hung up the imported cell phone with suddenly firm and decisive fingers before completing the 16-digit international dial to the Raffles Hotel where he was staying in the presidential suite. It was exactly at that moment of silent, powerful, and transcendental epiphany, alone in the imposing home office he considered his sacred, exclusive, and inviolable territory, where I only entered to dust the corporate trophies and organize his Italian leather folders, that I made the most important, courageous, revolutionary, and transformative decision of my wasted adult life. He would never, ever, under any conceivable or imaginable circumstance, know about the millionaire inheritance that would make me finally, gloriously, magnificently, and definitively independent both financially and emotionally from his controlling clutches. The decision reverberated in my mind like a cathedral bell announcing resurrection, every cell in my body seeming to awaken from a 2-decade coma, as if I had finally found the golden key to the invisible prison that kept me captive in my own life. With the strategic, meticulous, surgical, and absolutely confidential help of my brother Lucas, experienced and brilliant accountant with a master's in international tax planning from NYU, doctorate in strategic wealth management from Wharton, and vast accumulated experience of 20 years in sophisticated asset protection and confidential wealth management for high-net-worth clients, we assembled during exhaustive weeks of intense and detailed planning an absolutely meticulous, legally bulletproof, and technically impeccable plan to protect every precious cent of my newly acquired patrimony from Roberto's voracious, predatory, and relentless clutches. Lucas worked tirelessly, his hands dancing over financial calculators and complex spreadsheets, green eyes identical to mine but marked by fraternal worry wrinkles focused on every microscopic detail that could compromise our strategy. We transferred absolutely everything through complex banking operations, structured in multiple layers like a financial onion, strategically triangulated between different countries with favorable banking legislation and legally protected by irrevocable and irreversible contracts to specific accounts opened in different first-line Swiss financial institutions with centuries of tradition in banking secrecy. Diversified investments carefully selected by consultants specialized in conservative low-risk fixed income and aggressive high-potential variable income that would never appear, under any circumstance, in common shared bank statements or joint tax returns that Roberto examined obsessively, compulsively, and paranoidly every March with a German jeweler's magnifying glass, looking for minimal expenses to criticize and transform into 2-hour sermons about fiscal responsibility. Every financial movement was calculated with Swiss aerospace engineering mathematical precision. Every international transfer planned with strategic anticipation of a Russian chess grandmaster calculating 20 moves ahead. Every official document filed in ultra-secure bank vaults with biometrics and facial recognition to protect what was mine by legitimate, unquestionable, inalienable, and sacred hereditary right after endless years of systematic, calculated, and cruel humiliation that had corroded my soul like sulfuric acid slowly dripping on marble. Lucas hugged me at length after we signed the last documents, whispering in my ear with a voice choked with contained emotion. "Now you're protected, Marina. Now you can choose your own destiny without depending on that narcissistic monster disguised as an exemplary husband." When Roberto finally returned from the international trip after 2 blessed weeks of absence that were the most liberating, transformative, and revealing of my entire adult life, artificially tanned in that uniform, unnatural golden tone that only excessive money can buy in German-imported tanning chambers, exuding his characteristic French perfume Creed Aventus that cost an absurd $4,500 for a 3-ounce bottle, more than 3 months' minimum wage for an honest American worker, wearing his custom-made Armani suit worth $15,000, like medieval armor against the inferior and despicable world surrounding him. I casually mentioned during the silent, tense, and formal dinner of Norwegian grilled salmon with Peruvian asparagus imported by plane that Aunt Clara had passed away peacefully, serenely from natural causes in her modest downtown apartment while sleeping her last sleep, found by the worried neighbor after 3 days without answering the door. That eccentric, pathetic, senile old crazy lady who collected mangy, abandoned cats and dead plants in cracked pots? At least she won't show up anymore at mandatory family Christmas gatherings asking to borrow money with that whiny, irritating voice, embarrassing everyone with her outdated thrift store clothes smelling of mothballs and mold, was his automatic, cruel, insensitive response devoid of any trace of basic humanity. Without even lifting for a second those icy, empty, dead blue eyes from the latest generation imported iPhone, where he obsessively, compulsively, and uninterruptedly checked New York, Tokyo, and London stock market quotes, volatile cryptocurrencies rising and falling like a financial roller coaster, and coded messages from his blonde personal secretary, whom everyone knew but pretended not to know was more than a secretary. That endless, infinite, suffocating night that stretched like a century of Garcia Marquez solitude, lying beside him in the ostentatious 600-square-foot master bedroom we physically shared, but which seemed an insurmountable, insuperable emotional abyss growing the size of the Grand Canyon multiplied by 1,000, listening to his regular, indifferent, satisfied breathing while he slept the deep sleep of the righteous, privileged, and unconscious of their own evil. I made the definitive, irreversible, revolutionary, and liberating decision that would transform our dying, putrid, toxic marriage into a strategic battlefield where I would finally have the weapons to fight. I would not only meticulously, strategically, and obsessively hide the transformative millionaire inheritance, but make him believe piously, religiously, absolutely, and without any shadow of doubt that I was in a more precarious, desperate, pathetic, and miserable financial situation than ever in my mediocre life as a failed professor. I then began the gradual, calculated, methodical, and theatrical transformation of my domestic image with the millimetric precision of a method actress obsessively preparing the role of her life in an experimental avant-garde theater play. I completely, abruptly, and definitively stopped buying new clothes in the middle-class department stores I sporadically frequented when I managed to save some money from the monthly shopping. Starting to repeatedly, obsessively, religiously, and deliberately wear the same faded, worn, torn, and mended pieces from my wardrobe, dating from 5, 10, even 15 years ago. T-shirts with small strategic holes that gradually increased, jeans with frayed hems unraveling thread by thread, shoes with soles worn down to the midsole that creaked painfully when walking through the infinite Carrara marble corridors of our luxurious apartment that looked more like a mausoleum of dead marriage. Roberto viscerally, sadistically, sexually, and deeply loved seeing this progressive and humiliating aesthetic deterioration that confirmed all his elaborate misogynistic theories about the intrinsically parasitic and inferior nature of women, savored with almost orgasmic pleasure the petty, childish, and pathological power of arbitrarily giving or denying $50, $100, at most $200 for the weekly supermarket like a medieval feudal lord, distributing counted crumbs to hungry and grateful serfs. Marina, you need to learn to save better. $200 should be perfectly fine for a week if you don't waste it on unnecessary feminine superfluities, he would pontificate from atop his imaginary throne while spending the equivalent on a single bottle of wine to impress clients. Every systematic humiliation suffered in apparent silence but boiling inside like a volcano about to explode. Every degrading comment about my sloppy appearance as a failed university professor without ambition. Every veiled or explicit threat about leaving me helpless on the street like any homeless beggar without shelter or food. Absolutely everything, every word, gesture, look, and sigh of disdain I meticulously, obsessively, detailed, and religiously noted in a secret digital diary protected by 3 layers of complex password and military encryption, documenting precise dates with day and time, exact times down to the seconds, specific context with witnesses present, and literal words transcribed for future devastating legal use when the apocalyptic, glorious, and vengeful moment of truth being revealed like a nuclear bomb arrived. My friend Sylvia Montenegro, internationally renowned clinical psychologist with specialization in domestic violence and narcissistic abusive relationships from the Sorbonne, became my unshakable emotional anchor, bright beacon of sanity, and sacred confidant during this dark, dense, suffocating, and seemingly endless period of silent preparation for the coming battle I knew would be epic. She patiently, lovingly, professionally, and tirelessly helped me understand through informal therapeutic sessions, skillfully disguised as innocent afternoon coffees, what I had been living for years without being able to adequately name, without having emotional vocabulary or psychological tools to process the extent of the abuse. Dear Marina, my brave and resilient friend, what you're suffering daily, systematically, methodically, and cruelly is systematic patrimonial violence extensively documented in international specialized literature, continued psychological violence officially recognized by the WHO as a form of torture, financial gaslighting exhaustively studied by renowned international experts in marital abuse. She explained with professional gentleness, delicately mixed with barely contained personal indignation in our sacred, secret, and transformative Wednesday afternoons at the discreet and welcoming neighborhood cafe, when Roberto naively, stupidly, arrogantly, and predictably thought I was giving extra classes at the university to earn miserable additional money he could control, account for, criticize, and diminish. But I was no longer just passively, submissively, resignedly, and silently accepting the abuse like a defenseless, broken, hopeless victim. I was documenting absolutely everything with obsessive academic rigor of a researcher, building a devastating, irrefutable dossier worthy of criminal prosecution, patiently waiting like a spider methodically weaving its web for the perfect, surgical, definitive, and glorious moment to reveal the explosive truth that would completely destroy him. Sylvia held my hands when I cried from contained rage, accumulated frustration, and daily humiliation, her brown eyes full of professional compassion and genuine friendship. One day, Marina, one day soon you'll break free from this psychological prison. And when that day comes, I'll be here to celebrate your freedom. Roberto reached the absolutely degrading, humiliating, inhuman, and pathological point of making detailed and complex Excel spreadsheets with colorful graphs, pivot tables, and elaborate formulas, highlighting in screaming arterial blood red every cent I supposedly cost monthly for his privileged and productive existence as a successful alpha male provider. He spent hours in the office, fingers flying over the imported mechanical keyboard, creating PowerPoint presentations about my cost-benefit as a wife, as if I were an investment with negative return that he maintained out of charity. High-speed fiber optic internet of 500 megs for your mediocre, pathetic, and useless online classes that nobody watches because they're boring. $230 monthly thrown in the trash. Triple filtered drinking water wasted in your long, unnecessary, luxurious, and irresponsible 20-minute shower when 10 would suffice. $57.30 down the drain. Expensive, superfluous, and unnecessary certified organic food that you eat without contributing a single cent financially while getting fat sitting reading useless books. $685 feeding parasitism. Electricity spent with your obsolete computer, lights on, and dusty books that nobody reads or will ever read. $120 illuminating mediocrity. Total monthly parasitic drain vampirically sucking my productive existence and prosperous future. $2,342.30 that could be productively invested in high-performance stocks or promising cryptocurrencies generating real, multipliable wealth instead of sustaining your unproductive intellectual mediocrity and chronic marital parasitism. The words cut like sharpened razors, razor blades on my already lacerated and bleeding dignity. It was systematically degrading like Chinese water torture, methodically dehumanizing like the personality destruction processes described by Hannah Arendt in her works on totalitarianism. But I smiled submissively with trembling lips shaking with contained rage, apologized elaborately, pathetically, and humiliatingly for my burdensome, parasitic, and unproductive existence, and carefully, religiously, obsessively saved every humiliating spreadsheet digitized in a secret folder on the computer protected by password and cloud backup. My lawyer would love to examine in detail, minutely, surgically, those crystalline evidence of documented systematic psychological abuse when the adequate moment of the legal apocalypse approaching like a runaway train arrived. The federal court was absolutely packed that decisive and historic Thursday morning. Roberto had strategically, arrogantly, stupidly brought business friends and financial market colleagues to witness his masterful success in getting rid of the failed parasitic wife who trapped him for 2 decades of suffering. Perfect for our meticulously planned Machiavellian purposes. The more eyewitnesses, the better the seismic impact of the revelation that was to come like an atomic bomb would be. The public humiliation would be proportional, exponential, multiplied by the arrogance demonstrated during years of toxic marriage. I recognized faces from the golf club, from the marina where he docked the yacht, from his elitist social circle. They all came to watch what they thought would be his moment of glory. Judge Beatriz Carvalho entered punctually at 9 o'clock sharp, with her black robe billowing like wings of justice. She was an imposing, majestic, formidable black woman of 58 years, nationally known for her rock-solid integrity, razor-sharp sense of justice, and absolute intolerance for domestic abusers of any type, social class, or economic power. Her presence filled the room with natural authority, making everyone instantly fall silent. Dr. Carlos began pompously, theatrically presenting Roberto as an exemplary, self-made working man who built an empire from nothing with his own hands, who heroically sustained an ungrateful, lazy, parasitic, and unproductive wife for 2 entire decades of personal sacrifice, generously offering $3,000 monthly for 3 years, despite having no legal, moral, or ethical obligation according to him and the selected jurisprudence. Then came our strategic, surgical, definitive moment to completely turn the game like a poker table in a Western movie. Dr. Helena rose calmly like a lioness preparing the deadly attack, adjusting her reading glasses with calculated and studied movements. Your Honor, before discussing values and alimony terms, I would like to adequately, deeply, extensively contextualize the real nature of this 22-year marital relationship of systematic, calculated, and documented suffering. She began methodically, relentlessly, surgically presenting the humiliating spreadsheets with degrading comments in blood red, the obsessively highlighted documents with offensive annotations and petty calculations that transformed a human being into an accounting expense, into a liability on the balance sheet. The judge visibly frowned, her dark eyes narrowing dangerously like a snake preparing the deadly strike. This is definitely not normal or acceptable domestic financial control in any civilized culture or modern society. It's systematic and documented patrimonial violence, a crime clearly provided for in the Violence Against Women Act with severe penalties, she declared with authority that made the hall fall completely silent as if all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Then came the crystal-clear, devastating, irrefutable, and condemning audio recordings. Roberto's voice echoed through the silent courtroom like a ghost from the past demanding justice, calling me a parasite, incompetent, dead weight, genetic failure, human trash, waste of oxygen, words that cut the air like bloody razors. His business friends looked at each other embarrassed, uncomfortable, ashamed, some discreetly getting up to leave through the back door. The new girlfriend visibly paled like paper, then turned green, perhaps glimpsing her own dark and inevitable future in those cruel and revealing words. She whispered something about going to the bathroom and never returned. Your Honor, Mrs. Marina is not the helpless, dependent, pathetic, and miserable woman they want to make her appear through distorted, lying, and misogynistic narrative. 8 months ago, she legitimately received a substantial inheritance of $2,300,000 that is duly declared to the IRS with all taxes paid, Dr. Helena announced calmly, as if detonating a nuclear bomb in slow motion. The silence in the courtroom was absolutely deafening, sepulchral, supernatural. Roberto turned livid like a decomposing corpse, then red like a Malagueta pepper, then purple with apoplectic rage that seemed about to cause a stroke. His hands trembled visibly, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Dr. Carlos thunderously dropped his $3,000 Mont Blanc pen on the Italian marble floor, creating an echo that reverberated through the hall like cannon fire. His expensive glasses slipped from his nose, falling and shattering on the floor. Why wasn't this crucial, fundamental, essential information revealed earlier during the preliminary mediations? Asked the judge with genuine interest and arched eyebrows in curiosity, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear it for the official record. My client had justified, documented, proven fear of Mr. Roberto's violent reactions based on an extensive 20-year history of abuse. She strategically preferred to protect the legitimately inherited patrimony while meticulously documenting the pattern of systematic and escalating abuse. Even without knowing about the inheritance, he already treated her as an unbearable financial burden, disposable human trash. Imagine if he knew she had substantial millionaire patrimony. There would probably be physical violence beyond the already documented psychological, Dr. Helena explained with impeccable and irrefutable logic that made several present nod in agreement with expressions of understanding and even approval. Roberto completely exploded, losing any composure, dignity, or control. This is premeditated fraud, embezzlement, fraud! She lied shamelessly, hid marital assets, It's a federal crime. Procedural fraud, procedural bad faith. I want immediate criminal measures, preventive detention. She has to be arrested. His voice was 3 octaves higher, drops of saliva flying as he gesticulated frantically like a crazed conductor, his face contorted into a mask of pure hatred. The judge banged the gavel with force that echoed like thunder from Olympus. Mr. Roberto, contain yourself immediately or you'll be forcibly removed from the room by court officers and may be held in contempt of court. Mrs. Marina, calmly explain your reasons for the record. I stood up with legs trembling slightly from contained emotion, but with a surprisingly firm and clear voice that echoed through the silent courtroom. Your Honor, I lived 22 endless and torturous years hearing daily, religiously, obsessively, that I was a parasitic, dead weight, a genetic error of nature, a waste of precious resources. When I received the inheritance from my dear aunt who always believed in me, my first natural instinct, conditioned by years of brainwashing, was to tell my husband, share the joy and relief. But that same fateful night, he cruelly humiliated me, as he always did, said my entire family was composed of genetic failures incapable of generating real value. I realized with crystalline and painful clarity that if he knew about the money, he would try to appropriate everything through psychological manipulation, emotional coercion, or physical violence, as he always did with my dignity, self-esteem, and mental sanity for 2 decades. So I legitimately protected what was mine by unquestionable hereditary right, and methodically documented who he really was, behind the facade of successful executive and exemplary husband he presented to society. Dr. Helena continued relentlessly presenting messages during the divorce with dates, times, and contexts. Accept the 3 miserable thousand before I change my mind and cut it to 2,000 or nothing. You know perfectly well you can't even pay the rent of a maid's room alone. Pathetic and useless creature. The judge examined all the evidence with meticulous attention of a forensic scientist, turning pages, listening to audios, reading messages, making extensive notes. Her face became progressively more severe with each piece of evidence examined. Mr. Roberto, you had every imaginable and unimaginable opportunity to treat your wife with basic human dignity and consciously, deliberately, systematically chose to humiliate her for decades. The fact that she has her own legitimately inherited patrimony doesn't change or minimally mitigate the extensive pattern of psychological and patrimonial abuse extensively documented here with irrefutable evidence. Your Honor, continued Dr. Helena with the voice of a prosecutor in closing arguments, considering the years of documented systematic psychological abuse and proven patrimonial violence with abundant evidence, we formally request half of all assets acquired during the marriage as provided by law, plus substantial compensation for immeasurable moral damages. Roberto almost choked on his own saliva, coughing violently and turning purple. Half? Half? She has 2 million criminally hidden and still wants half of my patrimony conquered with blood, sweat, and tears? Mr. Roberto, the patrimony built during the marriage is legally common in the partial community property regime, regardless of who worked outside the home. And the abundant and irrefutable evidence of systematic psychological violence only categorically reinforces Mrs. Marina's right. Furthermore, according to meticulous analysis of your own tax returns, which curiously present serious and suspicious inconsistencies, the real joint patrimony significantly exceeds $8 million, the judge observed dryly, leafing through tax documents. $8 million? Roberto always swore solemnly on the Bible that we had at most $2 million in declared patrimony. The judge immediately noticed the glaring discrepancy and began making furious notes that didn't bode well for him. I see here a clear attempt at patrimony concealment as well. Federal tax evasion, extremely serious with severe criminal implications. I will immediately notify the IRS and the federal prosecutor's office for investigation. After meticulously analyzing all the evidence for 3 endless hours of growing tension, the judge determined with solemn and definitive voice that echoed like divine sentence from Mount Sinai. Rigorously equal division of all marital assets without any exception, plus compensation of $500,000 for proven and extensively documented moral damages. The inheritance would remain entirely with me, as was fair, legal, and correct. Roberto would also have to pay all court costs and attorney fees for both parties, which would add up to more than $100,000. Roberto seemed to have aged 3 decades in 3 hours, his artificial tan contrasting grotesquely with the sickly, cadaverous pallor. Marina, You completely destroyed me, ruined my entire life, ended everything," he whispered as he staggered past, completely defeated, broken, and publicly humiliated. I could have responded with many cutting, vengeful, cruel, and deserved things, but I chose eloquent and powerful silence. Sometimes, silence is the most devastating possible response for a narcissist who always needed to have the last word in everything. We left the courthouse under the radiant midday sun that seemed to bless my liberation, and went to lunch at a simple but welcoming home-style restaurant in the historic downtown. The home cooking never tasted so delicious of victory, freedom, justice, and rebirth. For the first time in decades, I felt genuinely, completely free to exist without asking permission, without constantly apologizing for breathing the same air as the productive ones. In the subsequent turbulent weeks, through contracted specialized professional investigation, we progressively discovered more rotten and criminal secrets of Roberto. Hidden accounts in tax havens in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Luxembourg, totaling millions, 3 luxury apartments in Miami, Lisbon, and Paris in the names of fronts and shell companies, a 2 million contemporary art collection appraised and falsely declared as destroyed in a fire to receive fraudulent insurance. Each discovered fraud attempt resulted in growing substantial fines and multiplied criminal proceedings. The division that would originally be 50-50 ended up being 60-40 in my favor by punitive judicial determination for the discovered crimes. Roberto lost absolutely everything he most valued in his superficial and empty existence. The imported zero-mileage Porsche Cayenne, the 50-foot yacht docked at the city's most expensive marina, the collection of 17 Rolex, Patek Philippe, and Audemars Piguet watches, the cellar with rare centenary French wines. The young and ambitious girlfriend mysteriously disappeared the same day when she discovered through sensationalist news that he wasn't as rich as he appeared and had multiple criminal proceedings. Important clients immediately canceled millionaire contracts questioning his dubious professional ethics and irremediably corrupted character. In 3 months, he was unemployed, multiply prosecuted, and completely discredited in the entire market as an untouchable corporate pariah. The house where we lived for 2 hellish decades became exclusively mine by unappealable judicial determination. I completely renovated every room with vengeful and therapeutic joy, painted the walls with vibrant and cheerful colors he always viscerally detested: radiant sun yellow, Amazonian hope green, celestial freedom blue. I transformed his pretentious, cold, and intimidating office into a welcoming library with heated floors, fireplace, and comfortable armchairs, filled with rare first editions of books he considered useless intellectual waste of time of unproductive people. With 6 million in consistently growing diversified patrimony, I continued teaching at the university because I genuinely deeply love what I do, not out of desperate financial necessity as before. I created the Marina Clara Foundation in honor of the visionary and revolutionary aunt who saved me, offering full scholarships and personalized mentoring for women in situations of extreme socioeconomic vulnerability. Each semester, we start with 5 carefully selected scholarship recipients through a rigorous process. Today, there are 20 brilliant students receiving complete help, including dignified housing in a supervised residence, balanced nutrition with nutritional monitoring, complete educational materials, weekly psychological support, and professional guidance with specialized coaches. Many come from abusive relationships similar to what I lived, carrying on their backs the same invisible but deep scars, the same traumas that need patient healing. A year after the transformative and liberating divorce, I received a pathetic and desperate letter from Roberto living in a tiny, moldy, rented 1-bedroom apartment in the deteriorated suburbs, working as a precarious and poorly paid freelance consultant for 1/10 of what he earned before. He desperately asked for a second chance with empty and pathetic promises, swore to have changed deeply after intensive therapy that clearly didn't work. I ceremoniously burned the letter without finishing reading the second page, the ashes flying out the window like freed black birds. Some bridges must remain definitely and permanently in smoking ashes for our own protection, sanity, and evolution. I began traveling the world, realizing dreams shelved for decades, writing academically and literally without censorship or fear. I published an international best-selling book about my experience using a pseudonym to protect innocent involved parties, but everyone who knew the real story knew perfectly. Thousands of women wrote to me emotionally from all continents, sharing their own stories of overcoming, transformation, and rebirth, saying the book gave them strength, courage, strategy, and hope to leave toxic, abusive relationships that imprisoned them in invisible but real cages. 3 years later, I permanently moved to the paradisiacal beach house that Aunt Clara secretly maintained on the preserved northern coast. Modest, but with a perfect and stunning view of the infinite turquoise blue sea, lush garden with tropical flowers and rare orchids she cultivated for decades, and mainly absolute, sacred, and healing peace. Waking up without biting criticism, without calculated humiliations, without constant fear was a daily gift I savored like golden honey of the gods. It was there, on a golden sunny Sunday morning with perfect sea breeze, that I met Eduardo walking along the deserted beach with his playful and philosophical golden retriever named Nietzsche. Retired but still intellectually active philosophy professor at the local university, widowed 5 years from a genuinely happy marriage. We talked naturally for endless hours about obscure books that only the two of us seemed to have read, revolutionary ideas that would transform the world if applied, dreams not yet realized but possible. When he discovered my financial situation months later through a casual comment, he said only with touching and disarming sincerity, "How wonderful that you can help so many needy people with your transformative foundation. It's rare to see wealth with real humanitarian purpose." We married in an intimate and deeply meaningful ceremony on the beach at golden sunset with 15 guests chosen with the heart. Lucas was my emotional best man crying like a proud child. Sylvia, my radiant matron of honor with genuine joy. We made vows about true and equal partnership, deep and unshakable mutual respect, joint growth and unconditional support, no mention of support or financial dependence, only true love and authentic companionship. The foundation grew exponentially like a realized and multiplied dream, helping 1,000 women annually throughout the country, expanding geographical and social boundaries. My books were translated into 15 different languages, touching lives globally and generating an international movement. I have a marriage based on genuine respect and deep mutual admiration, carefully cultivated true friendships, clear and transformative existential purpose that moves me daily. Roberto died alone and forgotten in his tiny, moldy apartment, found 3 days later by the underpaid Haitian cleaning lady. At the funeral, only 5 people attended, including the obligatory priest. He left a confessional letter admitting with trembling Parkinson's handwriting, "You became everything I said you'd never be capable of. I became everything I swore never to be. Alone, bitter, irrelevant, forgotten, a pathetic footnote in someone greater's story." Today, at 75 years with completely silver hair like polished silver, I lead the foundation that has already helped 1 million women globally to definitively free themselves. Roberto thought I couldn't balance a simple domestic checkbook. Today, I balance a $100 million annual budget with mastery and pride, transforming pain into purpose, trauma into triumph, scars into shared wisdom. If I could leave a final message carved in stone for all the Marinas of the world patiently waiting for their moment, your value isn't in salary, physical beauty, or submission. It's in the infinite, powerful, and divine capacity to be reborn from the ashes like a golden phoenix. The inheritance you seek is already in you, patiently waiting for the right moment to be released and bloom magnificently. Roberto obsessively measured my worth in how much I cost in water and food. Today, I measure my worth in how many lives I can positively transform. He thought I was dead weight sinking his mediocre life. Little did he know he was trying to drown an entire ocean. And oceans don't let themselves be damned by small men with even smaller souls. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions about this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.